Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Industry 4.0 Club Fireside Chat. My name is Mike Ungar. I'm one of the co-founders of the Industry 4.0 Club. Have been with them since the inception 3 years ago. My background is 35 years with Michelin in manufacturing, and more recently as a business coach and executive coach. I'm really excited today to host this with my co-host Mike Yost and our guest Larry Megan. Just to talk for a moment about the club. The club's purpose is to advance the deployment of Industry 4.0. We do that by hosting great conversations like this a couple times a week, and also doing some live programming and live events throughout the year. So I'd like to maybe Mike, you can introduce yourself before we get to our guest Larry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the intro, Mike, and welcome everybody for being here. As Mike mentioned, my name is Mike Yost. I've been in manufacturing for about 35 years, and for about the last 15 on the industrial nonprofit side. So helping the community, the manufacturers, the solution providers, the educators, the evangelists, try to figure out exactly the role and the fit of these evolving modern technologies for the benefit of the manufacturers. So appreciate being here. Been with the club since inception as well, along with Mike. And I'm really happy to have Larry here. Larry and I have worked together, I don't know, it's probably 5-6 years or more on a couple different initiatives. So really glad and to have him here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Mike. So the club is a partner with the Mx.0 Southeast event that'll be happening here in Greenville, South Carolina, April 17th and 18th. And our guest today, Larry Megan, is going to be one of the speakers there, as well as Mike Yost is going to be chairing one of the tracks during this event. So we wanted to explore today a little bit about what Larry's going to speak about during his presentation at the Mx.0 event. So just a little bit about Larry. Larry is head of digital for Baldwin Richardson Foods. He leads their digital transformation and IT groups. He's a senior digital transformation and Industry 4.0 expert with demonstrated success in manufacturing and process industries. Larry takes pride in bridging business and technology. He's proficient at developing and scaling digital solutions across all segments of manufacturing, with a strong track record of managing relationships globally across all company levels, from board members to frontline employees. So he is also a really strong advocate and participant in STEM-driven educational initiatives. So Larry, thanks for joining us. We're excited that you could take time out of your schedule just to help us promote this event and just share a little about your expertise. So welcome.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
So one of the other things that I found interesting, Larry, about yourself is you have a PhD in chemical engineering. And I'm wondering, how did you get from chemical engineering to being a digital champion? So can you tell us a bit about that journey for yourself?
Sure. And it goes back a long time, but even going back to my graduate work, we were actually working on using neural networks for advanced process control. And so even before it was called AI, or before, it had all the buzz. Frankly, if I graduated from school now, I'd probably have a lot different job than I took at the time, which was a more traditional chemical process engineering job. But so I've always been at that interface of computing technology and manufacturing. Went to work with a manufacturer, Praxair, now Linde, for many years, and have had a couple other stops along the way, but have always been in this manufacturing space. And like I say, always kind of at the interface between computing technology and the manufacturing processes.
Fantastic.
Mike, just to jump in real quick, I'm sorry. Larry, to your point about your education, your work, and neural networks and all that stuff so many years ago, my hope would be that manufacturers hear that and go, okay, all of this talk of AI and these new technologies and stuff is kind of daunting, but maybe it's not as daunting because we've been doing it for a while, or there's a long runway of people that have been there and done that. So is that part of the message that you take with folks, that it's not all brand new?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, this was like, I'll date myself, but 30 years ago. Right. And And we were doing stuff on 286 machines, right, and so forth, right? So if we go way back, so when PCs were like an exciting thing. So no, I agree. It's not really new, and it's funny. And admittedly, I am not as close to it, all the AI side, maybe as I used to be, sort of on the technical side. But a lot of the math is still the same. Well, of course, what's changed, of course, is the computing power that goes along with it has grown exponentially, right? But kind of the fundamentals are kind of still the same. What works, what doesn't work, and so I do think there's a lot of background and knowledge out there for folks to help with these kind of things. And to your point, not be as, let's say, scared about the unknown, right? So,
yeah, thank you for that. Sorry, Mike.
No, that's great. Thanks, Mike, for the question. So, Larry, I know you're going to. We talked about you're speaking at Mx.0 Southeast, and I know you're going to touch on a lot of different things in your presentation. Can you talk first about how important it is to prepare for the workforce for a company's digital transformation?
sure. I mean, it's the most critical part. Everybody talks about technology. Everybody talks about the latest and greatest AI, ChatGPT these days, right? But at the end of the day, if our workforce isn't ready and capable, then certainly from a manufacturing perspective, you won't have any success, right? And that goes everywhere from the frontline employees all the way up to the leadership in the organization, right? And so I'll give you the Baldwin Richardson perspective. So our mission is to really use digitalization to help drive competitive advantage. And if you're going to do that, there's kind of three aspects to it. One is, or there's three legs of that stool, if you will, from a strategic perspective. One is to find efficiencies and save costs across all aspects of the business. One is to help us from a top line perspective, help bring products to market sooner and better than maybe we have historically. And then the third leg of it is all about the people side, right? It's all about how do you enable the workforce to work in this kind of environment? How do you help them work in a more connected environment? And, you know, from a manufacturing perspective, it's people always, you know, the biggest complaint that people have is I can't find the talent that I need. And these days, you're not just competing against manufacturing, right? You're competing against the Amazon warehouse. You're competing against people working out of their homes, right? I could be a remote call center operator and make it myself and not have to go into a manufacturing plant every day. So for us, it's about how do we build the capability of our workforce to be more effective, and frankly, as part of that, give them a new vision of career paths. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to, like everybody, we want to be an employer of choice. And how do we do that? We have to do that by being able to show our people how we can develop them to be effective and marketable and thrive in today's connected world. So,
when you mentioned having to work on developing the workforce really at all levels for the digital transformation, I know for a lot of folks, at least mid-sized companies, they don't know where to start.
Right.
Do I start with the shop floor? Do I start with the management team?
Yeah.
Or do we need to really start with all at the same time? Can you have some insights there to share?
Well, I think you have to start with the leadership, and at least, I mean, it all starts with the leadership having a vision. They don't have to know all the technical details, but they have to have a vision and frankly, some exposure around what's possible. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where our CEO, my boss, she, like I say, she's committed to this. She's committed to making digital, like I say, driving competitive advantage, and you know, is willing to give the organizational resources to support all of that. And so it really starts, to me, it starts there. And especially for small and mediums, it could be a challenge, right? Because they're not interfacing necessarily with a lot of companies on a national level, right? As the Fortune 100 or 500 companies are. They tend to work a little bit more locally, right? So how do you help them get a vision of what's possible locally, I think is important. But I think, like I say, I think that's the first step, is showing the leadership meaningful, tangible case studies. And by that, I don't mean pilots, but I mean actual things at scale that are bringing value. And then help them get that vision of where this could really help their company, where are the most important areas, right? Is it about safety? Is it about, you know, increasing throughput, right? Wherever the key touch points are that'll drive ROI, and then working your way from there.
Great.
And Larry, one of the things that I see pretty regularly, and maybe it wouldn't happen with a leader like you mentioned, but I know a lot of people that are in a position where leadership has said, you go figure this out, right? You are the person who owns digital transformation or owns Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing for our company. And they just basically sort of put it off to the side, put it on one person's head, and then go about their business.
Yeah.
Can you comment on sort of what the breadth of digital means as well? It's not just one person's job at an organization, right?
100%. I mean, it's an organizational strategy. It has to pervade the organization. It has to work across all functions of the organization. And I'll give you a maybe not so simple, but an example, right? So we right now are in the process of a significant upgrade of our ERP system to a modernized ERP system. And one of the main drivers for doing that is, the old system had served the company well, but was pretty long in the tooth. And by, improving one of these really the key foundational platform within the organization, right, it becomes an enabler for other things that we want to do from a transformation perspective, right? And of course, that is not done in a vacuum. That has to be done with the buy-in of, as I sit around our leadership, the table with the leadership team, everybody obviously owns a piece of that, right? Manufacturing, supply chain, procurement, HR, et cetera, right? And so everybody owns their piece, and they have to be like fully engaged in that process for it to be successful. If not, then, you won't go anywhere, right? Because it's really something like that. You're requiring, back to the people side, you're requiring, in our case, over, 200 people across the organization to make some change in their day-to-day life, right? And so you have to be able to facilitate that, and the functional leaders have to be able to drive that within their teams. So.
Well, and you have to have a vision as well for what the changes mean for each other, right? Because if you're rolling out a new ERP system, well, what information does it need from your plant systems or your supply chain systems and vice versa? You can't build in a vacuum, right? Or you have systems that won't talk to each other. Correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. You mentioned earlier about how fortunate larger companies are because they can get broader exposure. How do we raise awareness among small and mid-sized manufacturers in order so that they get started on this digital transformation journey?
Oh, I love that. I love that question. So there's a couple of mechanisms, and one of them is a bit of a soapbox issue for me. So one is, obviously, what are the networks out there to allow you to hit the small and mediums, right? One is the local manufacturing associations, right? I'm here in Buffalo, New York. We have one. Our company's based in Rochester has one. So that's one means, right, to kind of get out in the community and see what others are doing. The downside of that is there's no connectivity. There's no real connecting glue between those kind of organizations, right? So, but at least it gives you some exposure, excuse me, within your local community. And if you have a couple of folks there, at least who are doing interesting things, then again, that gives the way to get started. At a national level, there's lots of national organizations. There's obviously the Manufacturing USA Institutes. They all have part of their charter to help small and mediums. But again, frankly, that's a hard resource for the small and mediums to really get engaged with, to understand the value proposition, or even to sort through, the different, even in the digital space, let's say the 4 or 5 Manufacturing USA Institutes, and understand how they could engage with them effectively. The best path to market is through the NIST MEP system, right? The MEPs, if folks aren't aware, the Manufacturing Execution Partnerships, it's a national organization funded by NIST. There's branches in every state. Some states have multiple branches, and they have a great path to market to the small and mediums. They traditionally help them with, I'll say, the blocking and tackling of manufacturing, right? Whether it be strategy, Lean Six Sigma, DoD level cybersecurity. So that's a great path to market. Having said that, that network has a relatively small number of folks within it, or organizations within it across the 50 states who have a real strong understanding of smart manufacturing. There's a few that are pretty good at it, but the bulk are still have a long way to go on the learning curve. And frankly, sometimes it's a challenge for their financial model to really enable that. But that's where I think there's a big opportunity but it would really require almost literally an act of Congress to help change how they're funded and kind of the mechanism to really bring more innovation and this kind of more forward-thinking view into that community.
Well, and that speaks. Those are great insights, and we encourage everybody to follow up on the resources that Larry mentioned. But also, I mean, that's why the Industry 4.0 Club exists, right? Yep. And we started as a band of people on a social media app called Clubhouse that were getting together every day and just talking about stuff. No real agenda other than like, how do we help each other in this space figure out, these challenges that are going on. And then the Manufacturing X.0 event that you're speaking at and that I'll be at as well. So, places for people to come and share and get on the I guess start the journey or continue the journey, however you want to look at it. So what are you looking to get out of the event when you speak next month or you network next month?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Mike, right? Even though I've been at this space a long time, you always want to hear what others are doing because you always learn from others, right? So that network, that community, seeing what else is out there, seeing what's up is really important. For example, in my case, while I've been at it a while, I'm relatively new to the food and beverage space. And so, hey, what are other companies doing, just as an example, right? And how does that apply to us? So that part of it, I think, is really important. And then, like I say, on the flip side, for me, besides trying to drive, the strategy within BRF, bring new value at BRF and prepare us for the future, I really do try to help. I have the mission to help the small and medium manufacturers get on board with us, and then we can kind of show them how we're doing it, kind of a roadmap for doing it that makes sense and that is digestible. Again, if you're not a Fortune 100 kind of company, because I've worked in the Fortune 100 space, I've worked now in the small and medium space, I've worked in the nonprofit space, so I have a reasonable perspective of what can work and what works and what doesn't work, just depending on the size of your company.
And I think, I mean, that if someone's going to have a takeaway from today, or if I could poke somebody and say, hear what Larry just said, I think it's really, really important for people to get the fact that there are others out there like yourself who support the mission of trying to help. I've been fortunate, been working on the nonprofit side for the past 15 years, and I've met people like you. I've met people, through the SMLC days and the MESA days and the Sesame and all of these acronyms of nonprofit organizations that have the charter to do what you said, to help people, to share and to learn with and from each other, I think is really, really encouraging. It's not necessarily easy to know exactly where to go, but when has manufacturing ever been easy, right?
Right.
But I would just encourage people that this is all part of, that's why we're all connected here in this kind of an ecosystem to help share and learn with each other.
100%.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One of the things the title of your presentation is Industry 4.0 for small to mid-sized businesses, scale your digital transformation plans. Talk about scaling. What does that mean? So when we talk about scaling, so we talked for a moment already about getting started, but so now I'm started. What does scaling mean?
I mean, to me, scaling really means it's about how do you maximize the value from what you're doing, right? So that's what it's about. And so how do you take a solution that you have on one line or at one plant, obviously, and then replicate that to other plants, other lines, right? So again, so that you can maximize the value proposition there. It starts with one of the benefits that we have as a smaller manufacturer that some larger companies don't have is it helps to have common foundational platforms, right? So I talked about our ERP. We're also in the process of upgrading our MES system, and because we're a company with basically 4 manufacturing sites, we can scale and have consistent foundational platforms across all of those facilities. And then because of that, right now, if we develop a new innovation that's on top of one of those, and the ability to pick it up and move it is relatively easy, right? It doesn't require interfacing to a bunch of new systems and so forth, right? So that's actually one of the reasons why, and again, obviously for larger companies, and I know from experience, that can be a challenge if you have a global company and you have 10 different ERPs across the company as an example, right? And that's a hard lift sometimes. So that is one of the things that the small and medium manufacturers should have going for them, and they should take advantage of. But that idea of, like I say, kind of modernizing, you can talk about AI solutions and machine learning solutions, but none of it's going to be effective or sustainable if you don't have those strong foundational systems and processes in place. So like I say, from our side, we've been doing a lot on the system side. I mentioned the ERP and the MES, and we've also our manufacturing team has been doing a lot of work on the process side over the last couple of years, just to drive more consistency on the shop floor, as an example, to have standard ways of working, right, to do all those kinds of things, and make sure, again, that it's replicated from, to basically make sure that we have a BRF operational playbook, if you will, right, from site to site, that can be used. And then that really is what will ultimately help us scale, right? And then, like I say, the third piece will be, which we're still in the early stages of, is starting to build greater and greater digital aptitude amongst our team members. And with that, again, doesn't matter what site they are at, they have a certain level of capability, competency, knowledge, understanding, and that will also help. So,
Larry, can I dig into something that you brought up here through a couple of the things you've mentioned?
Sure.
You've talked about ERP systems, MES systems.
Yeah.
You also talked about capabilities, right? From a company perspective,
Yeah.
right? And I think people oftentimes get confused, or it is confusing to think I need an MES system, right? Or I need this type of system versus I need some capabilities, and then what tech do I need? So could you maybe talk about how you manage that from an expectations perspective?
Sure. So, let's take the MES example, because we are actually in the process of upgrading our MES platforms. To your point, what we need is, in our business, the food business, one, we need a platform to manage the quality of our product as it's being produced. Right. We are held by regulatory standards to, like I say, monitor quality in production, post-production, all of those kinds of things, right? So we need a platform to make sure that we do that consistently, not only, obviously, primarily, of course, for the benefit of our end customers, but also for, like I say, regulatory audit reasons, right? So that's the business driver that we need. We need a means to manage, to really get visibility into the efficiency of our production, right? Fundamentally, like many companies, I guess I would say we're in a fortunate position that we have a pretty strong market demand. And so if we can make it, we can sell it. And so the question then becomes, how do we maximize the throughput off of our production lines, right? And so how do we really understand where those gaps are, whether it be on the processing side? We're in the food business, so we mix up a bunch of ingredients in a tank, just like a big version of your kitchen, and we make the end product. And then we transport it over to packaging lines, and we put it in anything from little tiny packages to really big packages. And of course, that packaging piece is 6 or 8 discrete pieces of equipment, all operating in series, and they all kind of have to be synchronized together to maximize throughput. And so how do we really get the data that we need to drive visibility around where the gaps are, where the bottlenecks are, what's driving losses in productivity or OEE, right? So those are the business drivers, right? And then from there, how do we get a platform that enables us to really be able to see it, measure it, act on it, etc.
And I think that points to one of the things that you mentioned earlier about leadership and having that vision, that strategy, because all of those different entities that you mentioned have their charter, or have their, we're trying to make this machine more effective. We're trying to capture quality, right? We're trying to produce more. We're trying to, introduce more products. Right? So there's all these different areas, and every single area is getting bombarded with potential tech solutions that can help them do what they do better. But how does it fit into a bigger, corporate strategy?
Absolutely. So part of my role is to help with that, right? Is to piece together and not help just drive, I'll say, these big foundational systems, but as we look at other pieces, what could help procurement? We were just talking yesterday around a solution to potentially help our finance team, as an example, and how does that fit into the bigger picture of what we're trying to do here and integrate with what we're trying to do.
Well, that's neat. It sounds like you're in the middle of a lot of great stuff, which is so exciting to hear. I really am. It's fantastic to hear about the real life. Here's where we're going, and here's what we're trying to get done. Which really leads me to as we kind of talk more about your presentation at Mx.0 Southeast. What do you hope people get? Why should people attend your presentation? Maybe that's a good way to ask the question. What would you hope people would? Why should they attend, and what should they take away from it in anticipation of that?
Yeah, again, I hope that they can take away that, again, and I'm a little bit biased these days towards the small and mediums, but really for anybody, but certainly for them, that one, what's the art of the possible? That there are things that you can do, and we do. I'm talking about some of our big programs, but we have some smaller things that are going on right now. I mean, just the act of introducing better analytical platforms, right? Better ways to visualize the data, right? Pretty straightforward things in the big scheme of digital transformation. But to show that can be an effective starting point, right? To kind of getting momentum, relatively low cost, and get started. And then kind of in the broader context, helping folks see, we'll talk basically like say kind of what's our roadmap to do that? How do we start? How do you start small, but think big and work your way towards that? How do you build, like I say, how do you have to have sort of a dual strategy that's focused on both the foundational platforms that will be needed for sustainability, as well as the innovations that could be differentiators from you as in a competitive environment. How are we thinking about upskilling our workforce and the processes that we're going through on that? And like I say, just kind of a whole level roadmap of how you can crawl and then walk and then run. And look at it from a strategic perspective, not, as Mike said, just as a bunch of different tech solutions coming flying at you at one time.
Yeah, and I would encourage people to come here, Larry, because he doesn't have anything to sell you, right?
That's true. That's right.
And this is free knowledge and experience. Someone who's been there, done that, is doing that. So
that's fantastic. No, it sounds like a great opportunity, and it's really quite special that folks can come to an event like the Mx.0 event and hear someone with your expertise share your knowledge and be willing to do that. That's not everybody's, as we said, I think we said earlier, that's not what everybody likes to do. So the fact that you're willing to give back to the community is really something special, I think. So thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that. And I'll actually slide in one more thing, which is that I forgot to mention, which is also you have to think about your team, right? And how do you build a team? And how do you build an ecosystem of partners to do this effectively? And like I say, there's one sort of answer or set of answers if you're a larger company. If you're a smaller company, it's a little bit different. So we talk a little bit around how we envisioned our team and so forth, and try to position them to have the right sort of level of expertise at an appropriate scale for the size of the company.
Fantastic.
I think that conversation about ecosystem is fantastic too, Larry, because it's sort of the modern way that we have to do things, right? And the traditional ways of, defining a system, getting educated about that system, buying that system, it sort of doesn't work nowadays, right? We need to understand and learn from each other without it being tied to there's something I'm buying at the end, right? And how we share with people, because there's value when you buy from somebody that has an expertise, whether that's in consulting or education or systems or machinery, whatever it is. There's value there that you need, right? And so how do you get to that point where you establish the connection that's what I need and this is who I'm working with? And for them, they're establishing probably a long-term connection that's good for them, for their business's perspective. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the ecosystem is great. Could you touch maybe one thing just to back up a little bit? You brought up workforce early on, and you talked about upskilling existing workforce. Could you just talk about maybe future workforce versus existing workforce, and sort of how you're approaching it from a digital strategy?
Sure. So I don't know if there's anything unique, but we think about it, excuse me, in the context of personas, right? So frontline operator, for example, a knowledge worker at the plant, the plant manager, and executive leader, right? To take a few examples, right? And so then you look at them, and we're working, and again, we have sort of fortunately, I have like an ecosystem of past partners, because I've been at this a while, that we can look at and start to frame for each of those personas, what's the expectation of that person, what's the job description, if you will, 5 years from now versus today, right? So a simple example of that is, if I take our frontline workers as an example, right? Today, the vision is we want them to convert them from people who are just helping produce the product to people who are helping the productivity of the process, right? So instead of just somebody who's helping move bottles or cases down the line, that some of that honestly will be taken by automation, but to get to them a level of knowledge around data and information where they can more easily assess, hey, and they can go back to their shift huddle or their shift meeting and say, hey, these are the data to show it, right? Here's the most common causes of downtime in my line or stoppages that we've had on the line over the past 8 hours. Here's the Pareto chart. I know what a Pareto chart is. And now I can bring that to the shift meeting and say, hey, look, here's the couple of things to work on so that the next shift, the maintenance team, whoever, right, can get after it. And again, we can kind of solve those problems more closer to real time, right, than letting them linger for a couple of days or for a week until the operations engineer has a chance to see what's going on, right? So like I say, it's kind of moving people. Digital transformation at the end of the day is simply how to use data to make more proactive decisions.
Right.
And right, so how do we enable folks to be able to take advantage of that, right? That's what we're trying to do.
Do you think that, I've been thinking about stewing on this for a little while, your point about them understanding the impact of their operations on the broader process and stuff like that. How about teaching people the business, right? Like understanding that you're in the food business and what happens when something goes wrong, what is the impact on the company, their line, their, whatever, when things go right.
100%. No, I am all for that. We have a way, we still have ways to go there, but for sure we're trying to, that our operations team is really drilling into, like I say, for example, with the frontline folks, hey, we'll use OEE as our metric, right? What is our OEE? And if we can move the needle on OEE by 3 points, that's worth something. What's that worth?
Right.
Or vice versa, right? If something goes wrong and we lose it for something goes wrong, and we have some means to help them understand what the impact is on the business, on the performance of the business, on their bonuses, if you want to tie it down to an individual person, right? So that's definitely part of the equation. From the perspective of my team, we definitely try to further educate them more, who are the ones who are, more of the engineering kind of level folks who are delivering these solutions. We definitely try to drill in and educate them on, here's the P&L of the organization, and let's make sure that you can tie back what you're working on. You're not just working on a new automation algorithm. You're working on something, and you can trace that from there all the way to the P&L and where the
that's cool. Yeah, that connection's so important. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I do think too. You talked earlier about competing against the Amazon warehouses and other industries and stuff. And I think when you get people to the point where you were just talking about, you're allowing them to be problem solvers, and to me, that's what manufacturing is all about, right? Manufacturers are problem solvers,
right? And that's how you build, like I say, that's how you build continuity. That's how you build engagement, right? It's not just, I'm just stacking boxes all day, but, oh, wait a minute, I can see that I actually have a chance to help the company be successful and then grow my own career, right? So.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I wanted to turn for a second, Mike. I know you're also chairing a track at the conference. Can you talk a bit about the track you're chairing and maybe who people should expect to hear from during that?
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Looking forward to being there, seeing Larry, seeing his presentation. We'll be in a track talking about planning out your journey. So these types of conversations, and there'll be others that are going to be talking about change management and team building, and how you implement sort of the change management that comes with being digital, if you will. There'll also be other tracks on the technologies, Industry 4.0 technologies, and then sustainable manufacturing supply chain. So it's going to be a lot of content, a lot of different people, a lot of knowledge to share, a lot of hands to shake or fist bump, depending where we are nowadays. But yeah, it should be really good time to learn from each other. So looking forward to it.
Thanks. No, I think it should be a great conference. Any last comments, Larry, before we wrap up today?
Just that I think at the end of the day, it's not a question of if you need to get on board, it's a question of when, because the longer you take, the less competitive you're going to be over time. So figure out a way to get started, figure out that ecosystem of the resources that can help you.
Fantastic. Well, I just wanted to, we've been talking with Larry Megan from Baldwin Richardson Foods. Larry's going to be a speaker at the Manufacturing Mx.0 conference. That'll be in Greenville, South Carolina on April 17th and 18th. So if you haven't registered, here's the website. You can go to the website and register for the conference. We really would encourage you to attend. It's really one of the neatest things, that the educational content as you've gotten hopefully you've gotten the understanding is going to be quite rich. You'll be hearing from folks like Larry and Mike and others that will really share a lot of great information with you about Industry 4.0, about sustainability, really how to get started on your journey. So hopefully you'll be able to come to that event. So thanks again. This has been the Industry 4.0 Club Fireside Chat. We host these sorts of conversations on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, focusing on women in manufacturing, the future of manufacturing, fireside chats like this one, and people, process, and culture. So for the entire club, we want to thank everybody for joining us for this short conversation. And Larry, thank you very much. And Mike, thank you as well.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. My pleasure.